Art mode, hook, secret. Steve Jobs spent his life chasing the future. He built one of the most valuable companies in history. He changed the way people listened to music, used computers, and communicated with the world. Millions admired him. Billions used products inspired by his vision. From the outside, Steve Jobs seemed to have everything a person could ever want: power, success, wealth, a legacy that would outlive generations. But near the end of his life, as he faced a battle that money could not win, Steve Jobs was forced to confront a question far more important than business, innovation, or fame. What truly matters when time is running out? It was a question no technology could answer, a question no billionaire could escape. And according to those closest to him, the answer changed the way he viewed life itself. The man who spent decades building revolutionary products began looking at something he had often placed second throughout his career: family, relationships, and the moments that cannot be bought, designed, or reinvented. So, what was the final lesson Steve Jobs left behind? Was it about success? Was it about wealth? Or was it a warning from a man who had reached the top of the mountain only to discover that some of life's valuable treasures had been waiting elsewhere all along? To understand that lesson, we must return to the beginning of Steve Jobs' remarkable journey. Part 2: Childhood and Early Struggles. Long before he became one of the most influential figures in modern history, Steve Jobs entered the world under circumstances that would shape him forever. He was born on February 24, 1955, in San Francisco, California. But almost immediately after birth, he faced his first life-changing event. His biological parents, both university students at the time, made the difficult decision to place him for adoption. Steve was adopted by Paul and Clara Jobs, a working-class couple who lived in Mountain View, California. They loved him deeply and raised him as their own. Yet the knowledge that he had been given up at birth never completely disappeared from his mind. Years later, Jobs would admit that although he knew his adoptive parents loved him, part of him always wondered why he had been abandoned. That feeling became one of the hidden forces driving him throughout his life. As a child, Steve was intelligent, curious, and endlessly fascinated by how things worked. He would spend hours taking apart electronic devices, studying their components, and trying to understand the logic behind their design. His father played an important role in nurturing this curiosity. Paul Jobs was a mechanic and craftsman who taught young Steve how to work with his hands, but he also taught him something deeper. If you were going to build something, even the parts nobody could see had to be made with care. It was a lesson Steve never forgot. Yet despite his intelligence, he often struggled in traditional school environments. He was bored by routine, disliked authority, and frequently challenged teachers. While some saw a troublesome student, others recognized an extraordinary mind that simply refused to think like everyone else. As he entered his teenage years, Steve became increasingly interested in electronics, counterculture, and new ways of thinking. He was searching for something larger than himself, though he didn't yet know what it was. After graduating from high school, he enrolled at Reed College in Oregon. But there was a problem. His working-class parents had spent much of their savings to send him there. After only 6 months, Steve made a decision that shocked many people. He dropped out. To most observers, it looked like a mistake. A young man with no degree, no clear plan, no guarantee of success. But Steve Jobs saw it differently. He believed that following curiosity was more important than following a conventional path. Looking back years later, he would describe this period as one of the most important chapters of his life. At the time, however, nobody could have imagined that this college dropout would one day build a company that would transform the world. The future founder of Apple was still searching for his purpose, and that search was about to lead him toward an opportunity that would change not only his own destiny, but the future of technology itself. Part 3: The Road to Success. In the mid-1970s, Steve Jobs was still searching for direction. He had dropped out of college, experimented with different ideas, and spent time exploring spirituality and self-discovery. To many people, his future looked uncertain. But sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin when life appears to have no clear path. During this period, Jobs reconnected with a brilliant engineering friend named Steve Wozniak. The two shared a passion for electronics and a belief that technology could become something much bigger than most people imagined. At the time, computers were enormous, expensive machines used mainly by businesses, universities, and government institutions. The average person had little reason to think about owning one. Jobs saw things differently. He believed that one day computers would become personal, not tools for corporations, tools for everyone. In 1976, inside the garage of his parents' home, Steve Jobs and Steve Wozniak founded Apple Computer. The beginning was far from glamorous. There were no luxurious offices, no massive investments, no guarantees, just two young men with a vision and a willingness to take risks. Their first product, the Apple I, attracted attention among technology enthusiasts. But it was the Apple II that truly changed everything. The machine became one of the first highly successful mass-produced personal computers. For the first time, people began to see the possibilities of bringing computing into homes, schools, and everyday life. Almost overnight, Apple became one of the fastest-growing companies in America. And Steve Jobs became one of Silicon Valley's brightest young stars. Yet success only made him more ambitious. Jobs wasn't satisfied with creating products that simply worked. He wanted them to be beautiful, intuitive, and revolutionary. He obsessed over details that most people would never notice. He demanded excellence from himself and from everyone around him. This relentless pursuit of perfection helped Apple create groundbreaking products. But it also created tension. Many employees admired his vision. Others feared his intensity. Jobs was known for pushing people beyond what they thought was possible. Sometimes this produced remarkable results. Sometimes it created conflict. Then came one of the most devastating moments of his career. In 1985, at just 30 years old, Steve Jobs was forced out of the very company he had helped create. Apple's board of directors sided with other executives during an internal power struggle, leaving Jobs effectively removed from the company that had become his life's work. For many people, such a defeat would have been the end. Imagine building a company from a garage and then being pushed out of it while it continued to grow without you. Jobs was devastated. He later described it as feeling as though he had dropped a baton and watched it fall. But what seemed like a disaster eventually became one of the greatest turning points of his life. Instead of giving up, Jobs started over. He founded a new company called Next and invested in a small animation studio that would later become Pixar. At the time, few people understood what he was building. Years later, the world would. Pixar went on to revolutionize animated filmmaking with movies that captured the hearts of millions. Meanwhile, the technology developed at Next would eventually play a crucial role in Apple's future. The man many believed had failed was quietly preparing for an even greater comeback. And before long, Steve Jobs would return to Apple and transform the company into one of the most powerful businesses the world had ever seen. Bangkamunto Tiptok Sang Part 4, Peak Success, Family. Tiptok Sang Part 4, Peak Success, Family, and the Hidden Cost of Greatness. Part 4, Peak Success, Family, and the Hidden Cost of Greatness. When Steve Jobs returned to Apple in 1997, the company was struggling. Many experts believed Apple was running out of time. Its products were losing relevance, profits were declining, and competitors seemed to be pulling ahead. But Jobs saw an opportunity where others saw failure. He simplified Apple's product line, focused on innovation, and demanded a level of excellence that few companies could match. It was a risky strategy, but it worked. Then came a series of products that would redefine entire industries: the iMac, the iPod, the iTunes Store, the iPhone, the iPad. One after another, Apple introduced products that transformed the way people lived, worked, and communicated. What had once been a struggling company became one of the most valuable businesses on earth. Steve Jobs was no longer just a successful entrepreneur. He had become a global icon. People lined up for hours to buy products he introduced. Investors followed his every move. Journalists analyzed every word he spoke. To millions, he appeared unstoppable. Yet behind the extraordinary success was a more complicated reality. Building an empire required enormous sacrifices. Jobs was known for working relentlessly. He obsessed over details, pushed teams to their limits, and often placed the company's mission above everything else. His standards were legendary. He demanded perfection even when others thought perfection was impossible. That mindset helped create revolutionary products, but it also affected relationships. Over the years, many colleagues described him as brilliant but demanding. Some admired his ability to inspire greatness. Others struggled with his intensity. The same qualities that helped him build Apple sometimes created distance between himself and the people around him. His personal life reflected similar challenges. In his younger years, Jobs famously denied paternity of his first daughter, Lisa, despite evidence that pointed to him being her father. The situation became one of the most controversial chapters of his life. Years later, he would acknowledge mistakes made during that period and gradually rebuild a relationship with her. It was a reminder that even visionaries can make deeply human mistakes. As his life continued, family became increasingly important. Jobs married Laureen Powell in 1991, and together they built a family with their children. Friends often described Laureen as a stabilizing force in his life, someone who brought balance to a man whose ambitions often seemed limitless. Yet even with a loving family, immense wealth, and worldwide admiration, Steve Jobs could not escape a truth that affects every human being. Success does not eliminate life's most important questions. What truly matters? How much time do we have? And are we spending that time with the people who matter most? For years, those questions remained in the background. Apple was thriving. The world celebrated his achievements. His legacy seemed secure. But a challenge was approaching that would force Steve Jobs to look at life in a completely different way. A challenge that no amount of money, intelligence, or success could solve. His greatest battle was about to begin. Bankamun Toy Tiptoksang Part 5, Illness, Reflection. Part 5, Illness, Reflection, and the Truth He Discovered, near the end. In 2003, Steve Jobs received news that would change the course of his life. Doctors discovered a rare form of pancreatic cancer. For a man who had spent decades solving impossible problems, building revolutionary products, and bending reality to match his vision, this was a challenge unlike any he had faced before. Cancer did not care about wealth. It did not care about influence. It did not care that he had changed the world. At first, Jobs believed he could find another solution. He explored alternative treatments and delayed surgery, hoping there might be another path forward. It was a decision that would later become one of the most debated aspects of his medical journey. Eventually, he underwent surgery and continued leading Apple. To the public, he remained the same Steve Jobs, the confident presenter standing on stage, the visionary introducing the next groundbreaking product, the genius shaping the future. But behind the scenes, a different battle was taking place. As the years passed, his health continued to decline. Yet, even during some of the most difficult periods of his illness, Jobs remained deeply involved in Apple's most important projects. He understood that his time was limited, and he seemed determined to use every moment he had left. Something else was changing as well. The man who had spent much of his life focused on building the future began thinking more about life itself, about time, about family, about what remains when success is stripped away. Years earlier, Jobs had delivered one of the most famous commencement speeches in history at Stanford University. During that speech, he shared a lesson that had become central to the way he viewed life. He said that remembering he would die someday was the most important tool he had ever encountered to help him make big choices. Because almost everything, expectations, pride, fear of failure, simply falls away in the face of death. Only what truly matters remains. Those words carried even greater weight as his illness progressed. For decades, Steve Jobs had been admired for his ability to see the future. Now he was confronting something far more personal. The reality that time is the most valuable resource any human being possesses. Not money, not fame, not power. Time. And unlike money, once it is spent, it can never be earned back. People close to Jobs observed a man who increasingly valued moments with family and those he loved. The priorities that often sit in the background during a busy life suddenly become impossible to ignore when time feels limited. As his health deteriorated, one truth became clearer than ever. The products he created would survive him. The company he built would survive him. His wealth would survive him. But the moments shared with people he loved were the things that carried the deepest meaning. On October 5, 2011, Steve Jobs passed away at the age of 56. The world mourned the loss of a visionary. Apple lost its co founder. Technology lost one of its greatest innovators. But behind the headlines was a more profound story. A man who had achieved almost everything the world considers success had discovered that life's greatest value could never be measured by a balance sheet. And that realization became the final lesson he left behind. Part 6: Legacy, Final Lesson, and Conclusion. Today, more than a decade after his passing, Steve Jobs remains one of the most influential figures of the modern era. His ideas continue to shape the way billions of people live their daily lives. Every time someone unlocks a smartphone, listens to music on a digital device, or uses technology designed with simplicity and elegance in mind, part of Steve Jobs' vision lives on. Few people leave behind a legacy of that magnitude. Yet, if we return to the question we asked at the beginning, another legacy may be even more important. What was the final lesson Steve Jobs left behind? Many people assume the answer is innovation. Others believe it is perseverance. Some point to creativity or leadership. Those lessons certainly mattered. But as Steve Jobs approached the end of his life, a deeper truth emerged. Success is not the same as happiness. Wealth is not the same as fulfillment. And achievement is not the same as meaning. For much of his life, Jobs chased extraordinary goals and accomplished things that most people could only dream about. He built a company worth hundreds of billions of dollars. He changed entire industries. He earned admiration from around the world. Yet when faced with mortality, the things that mattered most were surprisingly simple: time, family, love, relationships, the moments shared with people who truly care about us. Those are the things that remain when everything else begins to fade. Perhaps that is why Steve Jobs' story continues to resonate with so many people. It is not just the story of a billionaire. It is not just the story of Apple. It is the story of a human being searching for meaning while trying to change the world. A man who achieved almost everything society defines as success, only to discover that life's greatest treasures were never things that could be bought. They had been there all along. His story reminds us that while ambition can build remarkable things, we should never lose sight of the people and moments that give those achievements meaning. After all, none of us know how much time we have. And that may be the most valuable lesson Steve Jobs ever taught. They were more than just a visionary. They were a human being, struggling to be seen. Maybe we admired the genius, but we never fully understood the man behind it. What do you think was Steve Jobs' greatest lesson? Share your thoughts in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this story, subscribe for more journeys into the lives behind history's most remarkable people.